Okay. You said you said you were recording, right?
Oh, I am recording. I will tell you right now, I am recording.
Okay.
I'm
I just
100%
started.
ready to go on
Yeah, all right.
our 10th episode of The Wrong Fit.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've hit double digits, which is crazy.
It is crazy. That is such a good. That's a great milestone because a big thing that was like hanging in my head was we need to like do better than trending left. Trending left. For those that are, I've mentioned it a few times, but I'll just say it again. Trending left was the political podcast that I did with some friends back in 2017. That is still like up everywhere on YouTube, SoundCloud. You can go listen to that if you want to see like what was going on in 2017. What were the hot stories
to The
right?
Wrong Fit.
Yeah, no, definitely not. But you can go ahead and look at that if you want to. But we only had 8 episodes of that before it just died. And obviously we beat 8 episodes with episode 9, which was I don't remember what episode 9 was called.
I mean, it was our most recent episode. Definitely
right,
check
it
was.
Health Warlords. So
yes,
we beat
yes,
that
yes,
with Health
COVID,
Warlords.
yeah.
But now we're episode 10, which is like its own milestone, which is great.
I mean, 9 is kind of like a weak milestone. Like 9, you're so close to 10, but like 10, that's a strong showing of a milestone, I think.
I think so too. And I mean, we got to 10 episodes in about 5 months, total time. Obviously, like the first 2 episodes were recorded like many, many months before the show actually premiered.
Mm-hmm.
I think like our pace of recording has been pretty much where I wanted it to be when we started, about 2 episodes a month ish. Obviously, your mileage may vary on that front.
Mm-hmm.
But we've been doing pretty well on that front, I would say.
Yeah, keeping it fresh, keeping it T.W.F. fresh.
Right.
But yeah,
right.
I mean, exactly. We're right there. 2 episodes every month, 10 episodes in 5 months. Like we're exactly there. I definitely agree that kind of like those first 2 episodes were very different than the rest. But at least we've been able to keep pace, after that.
Yeah, I mean, in that like we've actually like done this. Like we've been like keeping at it, and like progressing through the topics and things like that, and like you can see follow up and things like weave its way through every episode, so like it really feels like there's like a strong like canon developing.
It's very like I feel like I love those first episodes because I feel like those were like our formative years, and now we're growing into an adult podcast. Even though it was like less than a year ago, but I feel like it was still our formative years as podcasters.
Right.
But speaking of follow-up, you mentioned, follow-up is a big thing that we like to do here, a big through line of our show.
Right.
Before we kind of get into our decade podcast, it's not probably the right word, decade of our decennial, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, no, you got
podcast,
You got it.
Episode, celebration, extravaganza. Before we get into
It's a big episode. We got big things talking about. And don't say, I don't want to spoil anything for the viewers, but, there's some big stuff happening.
Let's not put the horse in front of the cart, though. Let's do some follow-up from episode 9 real quick before we get that.
Follow-up from episode 9. There's only a little bit. I think there's only one thing.
One segment.
One segment, yeah. So we talked last time about shorts and length of shorts and so on and so forth. In that I was talking about my sort of like insecurity and my thoughts about shortening the length of my shorts, right, from like the 9, 8.5 that I was so used to for so long, going all the way way up to 5.5 inch. Yeah, leveling up. I am excited to say that I bit the bullet and ordered some 5.5 inch inseam shorts since the last time we recorded. They have arrived in the mail, and I have worn them several times. And I wanted pictures. I wanted pictures to be ready by today. Unfortunately, that just didn't. I couldn't make that happen. But by next week or by next episode, like, I'll have probably some like real sexy photos up on Instagram. But I do want to say, even though without photos, I do want to say a few things about them. They're not as revealing as I thought they might be.
Oh man, I'm already disappointed.
Oh no, great! Oh great! I haven't taken a big enough step for Eli apparently. But honestly, like I was worried that like when standing up they would be really revealing in an uncomfortable way, but I'm really surprised at how comfortable I feel wearing them. I mean, certainly like they are more revealing than any shorts I've ever worn, but they don't feel, that insecurity isn't there for when I'm standing up and walking around, and like I'll catch myself in the mirror and I'll be like, damn, those are some good looking legs I've got
Those are some good
on
looking
me.
glutes on that man.
Yeah, I got some glutes. I got like my thighs. Like those are some good looking legs I got on me. Where maybe the love affair starts to maybe get a little derailed ever so slightly is when you sit down. That is like a weird thing because now you're confronted with like your thighs like getting like squished or like flattened, and now you've got like these big like pancakes for legs like in front of you, especially if you're a bigger guy like me.
Until you wear shorts like that, I don't think, and I say that because, you know, in my experience with shorts like that, I don't think you understand how like your muscle, like I don't know, this is like a weird way to put it, but like your muscles, when you're standing up, your muscles are like activated. Like, so you look better standing up, obviously. And like the weight distribution and like everything is just kind of like tighter when you're standing up. Naturally, you know, leg muscles are what's keeping you up, but
yeah. That makes perfect sense. And I think if you sit down, if you're sitting down right now, like try to like flex your muscles, try to like get them stressed, and like you'll notice that like your legs will like firm up significantly. Obviously, that's not something you can just keep doing all day. You know, it's really keep intense.
It tight.
You're right. Keep it tight. Right. That's the only thing. And the shorts as well, they have a tendency to like really ride up a lot.
Yeah.
So you have to like keep adjusting them if you're like self-conscious about that kind of thing. And also like I'm more aware of like where my underwear is like while I'm wearing those shorts. So like those are some like choices I'm going to have to make about like maybe like new underwear or something like that, or just not worrying about it because it obviously I have not had like indecent exposure or anything like that. I have not been in public.
You're really holding out on us. Like you got me so excited with there's no photo. I really need a visual representation of this. But
and you'll have it soon.
You're tantalizing us. Like,
yeah, but I did want to just like lay down the auditory thirst trap first before
ASMR, right?
You're right, some ASMR. Before I lay that down, that'll happen soon. I did just want to like quickly follow up and just say that yes, I have the shorts. I will be getting another pair because I got like a discount code in my email, which was cool. So I will be getting another pair, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Like I'm looking forward to this new like era I'm embarking on when it comes to like the shorts length. You know, feeling more comfortable with that. All right. So as part of as Eli mentioned, our 10th episode extravaganza, spectacular, like amazing, right? We are going to be doing...
You cannot overstate the fanfare for this. We're just such a big deal.
All right. Let me leave an auditory reminder for me to put in a whole bunch of like air horns right there for when you said that. Just make sure I go... that'll go in there for sure. So for the next 10 episodes, we are going to be, including this one, by the way, we are going to be talking about our respect, like we're going to be ranking different genres, categories of things. We're each going to give out our top 5, so that's going to equal 10 for 10, right? For the next 10. How many times can I mention 10 in a sentence? And we're going to be just talking about like our favorite things. That's going to range from movies, TV shows, clothing brands, cereals, and many, many other things that are coming down the pipe for the next 10 episodes from now, I guess until episode 19. Is that how that works?
Yeah.
I think I don't know how to count.
Math checks out, yeah.
That's where the math checks out. Yeah. For 20, we'll top 20 things, you know, we'll see where we go from there. No.
Top 1,000 things by
right.
keep exponentially growing.
Right. Today we have decided to start off with our respective each top 5 favorite movies, films, cinema, art. You know, we're going to start off with movies, and I understand that Eli has been toiling, working hard on these because here's some background. So we were discussing like what we wanted to do for our 10th episode, like how special we wanted to make it. And I suggested like, let's do maybe like a couple of top 5s not a couple. I said like, let's settle on a top 5. Mm-hmm. And I said, let's get together again and make sure like we nail down like what we're going to talk about. So we put down on our sheet, like, okay, like maybe we could talk about clothing brands, TV shows, artists, albums, maybe our top 10 favorite, our top 5 favorite episodes or whatever of the show. And I thought we were going to nail that down at some point, and we never did. And like right before we started recording, Eli was like, oh, hey, I actually did my top 5 for everything, and I didn't like have anything ready.
But Marco came in clutch with his already existing list of top 4, 5-ish.
Yeah. It was top 4 plus 1 favorite movies. So my top 4, that's already been nailed down, and getting my 5th one was pretty easy. I'm gonna put in the description my Letterboxd account. That's like a cool like movie related social network with like reviews and stuff. I've actually been like using it a lot more recently because I've been trying to watch like indie movies, like art movies, and I've been like leaving reviews and stuff.
Man, I feel like your list is about to put mine to shame. You know?
No. My list is very, very mainstream. It's not like artsy or anything yet. Maybe we'll get there in a few years because I'm trying to like expand my repertoire of movies and films and stuff. But for now, my list is pretty basic, pretty mainstream. So it's helped that I already had that nailed down. But I know Eli like made a whole bunch of lists, and I came here wholly and completely unprepared.
I mean, it was fun. Like I enjoy. Like I think it wasn't that like I was like, oh, maybe we'll do this one, maybe we'll do that one. I was just like, once I started making them, I was like, I am curious. What are my top 5 blank, things? And I'm excited to get to the rest of them. And I did have this one was one of the easier ones. Because I like cinema a lot. Like I watch it a lot, and I have several movies that are on the forefront of like this is my favorite movie. So I had a lot to choose from, but for some of the other lists, it was spoilers ahead. It was very difficult to kind of choose between a couple. But this one I was able to kind of narrow it down pretty quickly. So
yeah, good. So, like we mentioned earlier, this is going to be something we do from now until episode 19, different topics, top 5s. We hope you enjoy that, get to know a little bit about our favorite things, and I suppose we'll just get started. And we'll go back and forth from 5 all the way to 1, top number good. 1 favorite. So, Eli, what is your 5th favorite movie of all time?
Number 5. Okay, this is, so definitely like my kind of thought process was not like, I'm not trying to have the best movies. I'm not trying to say like, this is what Roger Ebert would be spending on his, little
Definitely
DVD
not.
player.
Definitely not.
I'm saying that these are just the movies that like were very formative for me, were most enjoyable for me, like favorite in that sense, if that makes sense. Like it's a special place in my heart.
Totally.
So it's knocking off the list, The Dark Knight. And I will preface this. This is my only Christopher Nolan movie on there.
Okay, that's a good disclaimer to have, because I feel like a guy like you could fill up your whole 5 with Christopher Nolan movies.
I do. There's several. Like I'm a big Nolan head, Nolaniac. But I this is the only Nolan movie on there, and like so definitely I could have put some other ones. I knew that one of the top 5, and I was erring on the 5th one being a Christopher Nolan movie. And so this one was the, obviously the last one on the list was the most difficult one, because you're kind of like, that's where you kind of choose who's on, who's off. Definitely like choosing between like Inception, Interstellar, a lot of the other Nolan movies I like. But what really brought me to The Dark Knight was just like, it was one of my first Christopher Nolan. I guess it was my second. The first one I watched was Batman Begins, came out in 2005. I don't think I watched it when I was 6, but I watched it, early.
Right.
The Dark Knight came out when I was 9, and being a 9-year-old, like Batman is the thing. And I was a huge, kind of background on me. I was a huge Batman fan, like comics, TV show, growing up watching the animated series. I think for a lot of people, and it was kind of, obviously there had been the movies that had come out both in the late 80s, early 90s.
Right.
And obviously those are very iconic movies. Don't want to depreciate anything from those.
But there's like a campiness that kind of runs through a lot of those movies from the 80s and 90s, and like The Dark Knight with Batman Begins, like that felt like this is Batman at his like grittiest and grimiest, and like this is what Batman is now.
It is now, yeah, and you're right. It created, like, I think that before 2005 and then after 2005, you just had a very different Batman. And I'm sure you can say that same thing with previous depictions, but for this one, just like being my coming of age Batman, it just had such a special place in my heart. But yeah, like after this, you get a gritty, mean, angry, tormented, kind of like borderline psychotic in the way that Christian Bale, portrayed the role. And, but going between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, I think for most people, that's not a difficult choice. Like, as much as I did love the original and as formative as it was, I was, like I said, I didn't watch it when I was 6 years old. I watched it, a little bit before I watched The Dark Knight. But like, just like, you can just tell, like, Heath Ledger's Joker is just so iconic. So like at this point, legendary, his depiction of that character. And, it was just so iconic of a movie. And there's not much more I can say, really. It was just an amazing, it was coming together of all these things of like me growing up, getting into more mature like themes, more mature movies, more mature artistic things. And also, my childhood love for the character of Batman kind of coalescing at the right time, at the right place. And that's what's so special about it is like, yeah, it's a superhero movie. Yeah, it's like this, it's not like, campy like any of these other past like superhero movie things, but it is a superhero movie. But I'm like 22 years old and I can still watch this movie and get a lot of enjoyment out of it. Let's start this off. Marco, what's your number 5? What's your
number 5? My number 5, I have to go with Ocean's 11 from 2001.
Good choice. Very good choice. No argument as of yet.
This is Clooney, Pitt, Damon at their absolute best. I mean, this is like peak. This is like peak all-star cast. Like, you have so many like iconic and memorable actors and characters here all in one place. It's actually like incredible, the star power that was gathered for this movie.
They had Don Cheadle in that movie too.
And Don Cheadle too. Don Cheadle plays an eccentric, like British, like perfect bombing expert. Like
it's not what I would have thought of like Don Cheadle qua John Cheadle, but it is
but like
so
this is him. This is him at his best. Like, this is every actor in this movie at their best right here. And like it's incredible. Like, I remember watching this movie when I was a kid and just just not understanding anything about the plot, because the plot is quite tricky, especially for a kid.
Yeah,
it's one of those movies that, like, as you grow up, every time you watch it every few years, like, you understand more and more of the plot. You get more and more of like little intricacies and idiosyncrasies of like these characters, the way they interact.
Yeah. Not just like how the plot worked, like the plot of like stealing the stuff. It's like the plot of like their motivations and like their, character.
The motivations is like maybe the last thing you get to like understand as you get older, right? Like you it's one thing like, oh, I know how like they were supposed to like open the vault or whatever.
When I was a kid, I didn't know what the Bellagio was. Like, I didn't know that was an iconic casino and like, all that stuff.
Right. I think that's like maybe the easiest thing for like a kid to appreciate, just Vegas in its like immense like opulence and like decadence. It is like the ultimate Vegas movie. But like I said, like as an adult, you begin to like understand like, Danny Ocean, he's just in it because like he doesn't want the money. He wants to like get his ex-wife back. Like there are all of those like things that like, all the motivations of each character. Great movie, incredible movie. Like the cast, I cannot say enough positive things about the cast. Like, this is George Clooney at his absolute best, Brad Pitt at his best, Matt Damon at his best. Eli, number 4. All right. Throw it down right now.
Number 4. So this one's interesting because it's not one that like a lot of these other movies are movies I have watched like 10 times, like, at least 3 times. But this is a movie I've only seen twice. Once in theaters and like once I rented it. It's Spike Lee's BlacKkKlansman. And I don't know if you've seen this movie, but it is like such a good balance of, contemporary issues, obviously, like, just the whole plot of like, I don't know if you're familiar with the plot, but
I actually, we never like anticipated like a movie that we haven't like seen.
Yeah.
I have not seen BlacKkKlansman, so I would hope that. So say it, a plot in the details without spoiling it for me, and maybe I just realized that like, I guess spoiler alert for the audience. We're gonna be talking about like 10 movies, and like I mean
these movies that we've talked about before this have. I mean, I didn't give any spoilers for my movie, or yours really, but like these movies came out like 10 years ago. I'll just give you like the plot and not like the climax, if that makes sense. So basically, the plot is. Ron Stallworth, I forget the actor who played him, but he actually, speaking of Christopher Nolan in the past section, he played a character in his most recent movie. But Ron Stallworth is a black detective, and he is like just he's like an up and coming like uppity trying to like prove himself detective, and he's black, and it's like very difficult, you know, being a black detective. So he makes like basically a prank call to the KKK, trying to like basically the entire movie is this kind of like sting operation on the KKK, but it begins with this character Ron Stallworth. He's doing his like white accent, you know, like he's like this black detective doing a white accent, and he like calls the leader of the KKK and basically is like pretends to be this white guy interested in joining the KKK, and that's and he's going undercover, like this black man is going undercover as a member of the KKK. So obviously when he's on the phone, it's a different character playing. I believe Adam Driver plays the in-person version of Ron Stallworth, who is a different detective in the same agency. And this is all a real story, by the way.
Great.
Black detective Ron Stallworth making a prank call to David Duke, the leader of the KKK. David Duke's like, I want to meet you. Obviously, you can't send the black guy to meet the KKK guy because he's going to realize that, you know, you're pulling my leg. So they switched the person who's being Ron Stallworth. So basically on the phone, Ron Stallworth is a black detective. In person, it's Adam Driver, who portrays a Jewish detective, which is, you know, an interesting, like, obviously the KKK has problems with both of these groups, and it's just interesting that, you know, both a black person and a Jewish person are infiltrating the KKK, going undercover to try and understand like the organization, and eventually like there's like a violent plot that is, you know, uncovered by them, and there's I'm not going to spoil it, but very good action scenes, very tense scenes between the actors. You know, definitely it's very interesting when like the seeing the antagonists in these movies, like these racist, like horrible people, kind of portraying, and it's just very tense when, like, and kind of in the same way with Ocean's 11, like there's this plot that's going through the whole movie, and you're just on the edge of your seat, like, are they going to get found out? Like, is it going to be spoiled? Like, you know, you're very excited for these characters, and it just the entire movie is action is well done. You know, the tense dialogue, acting is very well done, and the really cool thing about this movie is also folded into that is obviously a ton of social commentary, and I think that's what, you know, a director like Spike Lee does such an amazing job with.
Yeah, undeniably
weaving that social commentary, and I only want to say weaving because the entire movie is social commentary about, you know, the KKK in the South, but it's just so well done. Topher Grace plays David Duke, which Topher Grace is, you might know him from like That 70s Show.
Dimly.
Yeah, he's like the main character in That 70s Show. It's just hilarious to see like this Topher Grace play like an evil, you know, racist person.
Well, I hear you like describe. I heard you describe The Dark Knight, and I could tell like, okay, yeah, number 5, got it. But like you're describing like an excellent movie, but like why your number 4 specifically?
I just think that you know, as I've grown older, because this movie, I forget when it came out, but I saw it in theaters, like I mentioned, for the first time in theaters. And I was just like, it was I think it was early college, maybe late high school, pretty sure early college for me. It was just, you know, it was like, you know, not to get too political, this is not a political podcast, but it was very formative in my like, you know, obviously I'm still a young person. I like action movies. I like drama. I like blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But like, you know, maturing, like, you know, when you're a 22-year-old person, you're not gonna, you know, you don't think the best movie of all time is gonna be Transformers, you know, because there's not a lot of depth to it. But I thought that this did such a good job of like juggling, you know, kind of the more lighter action, tense dialogue, like typical good, like fun movie themes with like a very, you know, very powerful, like deep, multifaceted issues are being tackled story about like these characters that are real. Like I think that part added to it to me is just the realness of it. And like when it came out, I believe it was definitely was during the Trump presidency. So I think either 2017 or 2018.
Yeah.
It was just at the time, you know, again, not to make it too political, but it was just these issues were so powerful, and like things like the KKK, which, you know, I grew up not thinking of being a real thing, of not being an active thing, and not being a threat to society.
Right.
It was just like very interesting, and like, I don't know. I just remember like coming out of the theater, like feeling like I had learned a lot. And again, this is not a movie, unlike all the other movies on the list. This is not a movie like I'm going to watch like 10 times, because it is, you know, at points tough to watch, like very tense issues and like very hard. But definitely Spike Lee did an amazing job, and I just, it was very both meaningful to me in the way that, The Dark Knight, I know it's not the best movie of all time, but I still think it's like really fun. It means a lot to me. So both it means a lot to me, but also it was very, well done movie for sure. Hit me with your number 4.
All right, my number 4 is Catch Me If You Can with Leonardo DiCaprio, Tom Hanks, and Christopher Walken. This is a Steven Spielberg movie from the early 2000s. Have you seen this movie?
No. Okay, so I think it's perfect that I've been told many times. I think I've been told many times this is like a fantastic movie. I haven't watched it.
It is a fantastic movie. It is really, really good. One of Steven Spielberg's like kind of a low-key, underrated, maybe lesser-known movie, despite the fact it's got like an all-star cast. Because it's not only DiCaprio and Hanks and Walken, you also got Martin Sheen in there too, who's kind of well-known as well.
Yeah.
So, great movie. This is like a spy thriller kind of movie. It's a crime film, rather. It's based on a real story. It's based on...
That's what I thought.
Yeah, it's based on this guy who went around cashing fraudulent checks and like living a lifestyle based on lies, basically. Like he fronts being a doctor, being an airline pilot, being a lawyer. He actually passed the state bar exam with only 2 weeks of preparation. And to this day, we have no idea how he did it.
Wow.
So that just shows like how smart this guy was.
Wow.
So obviously Leonardo DiCaprio plays the main character, Frank Abagnale. Christopher Walken plays his dad, and Tom Hanks plays the agent, the FBI agent trying to catch him and like following the trail that leads to his capture. I hope that's not a spoiler because it is like a real life story. I won't tell you like the gory details or anything because like you really owe it to yourself to watch this movie. It is like one of the best, like really, really great crime film, one of the greater like based on the true story films. Like Tom Hanks is obviously incredible. This is DiCaprio at his most like charismatic and like really like sympathetic, like interesting like phase in his career. He's kind of like matured into like a big boss kind of like, I don't know how to describe like what DiCaprio is like these days, but like back in the early 2000s, the late 90s, like this guy was ruling the world, and
exactly.
and this is one of his greatest movies as well. So Catch Me If You Can, not a movie I grew up watching necessarily. I actually first saw it when I was in college, but like it made like a really big impact on me, and like not because it's like especially like emotionally moving or anything, but like the pacing is excellent, the direction is great, cinematography is great. Again, like the story and the characters are interesting, like they're relatable, even though like it's dealing with like fraud and like crime and things, right? But like you still find yourself relating to like the plight of these characters, the emotions they elicit. It is like it has a lot of tearjerkers and really interesting moments. So like I definitely great movie, recommend watching it. You've been recommended it. I think you've had a lot of people recommend it. Like you have to watch this film. It's really, really good. But yeah, that's my number 4.
Sounds like a really dynamic movie.
Why don't you go ahead and hit me with your number 3?
Number 3. So we had established previously in this segment that we have to, with the Ocean's movie, with yours, you chose one out of the trilogy. I wanted to, I think, and I already did this with The Dark Knight. I choose one out of the trilogy. For this one, I really wanted to do the Lord of the Rings trilogy as a whole.
Great, excellent choice. Amazing. I would have allowed it. I would have allowed all 3 of them as one. Okay. But I'm assuming you're about to pick one.
I'm going to narrow it down, and I'll rank them too, in my personal opinion.
Okay.
Definitely. I'm going to narrow it down to 2, because I just think that's the climax of the turning of the tide, as Gandalf would say. And the War for the Ring. I just thought that, second, Two Towers, Helm's Deep scene, iconic. All of that movie is just, completely iconic. That Helm's Deep battle scene, though, is so, like, one of the best battle scenes. Like, no hate to Minas Tirith. I'm going to let you finish, but Helm's Deep was the best battle scene of all time, in my opinion. And the way that you're so, like, emotionally, kind of, like, on edge during that scene where... you don't know, like, they get all the way down to the Helm's Deep Keep, like, at that end of that movie. I'm going to a very specific part of that movie. I just said I was going to talk about the whole trilogy, but that scene where you're, like, and they're in the Helm's Deep Keep, Gandalf goes, rides off, and you don't know when he's coming back, and like light of the
Right.
third day kind of thing. When he comes back, it's just like such like you're really on the edge of your seat because you're like these, they're at the end of the line. Like this is our heroes are like backed up against the wall, literally. It was just so amazing, just like that end scene where like you've seen the movie. I'm not going to spoil it too much, but when Gandalf comes back, it is just so amazing. Just like the Peter Jackson trilogy, and I'm going to talk about it now, more broadly, because I really would say that the Helm's Deep scene is what puts that movie over the edge for me. I think third that the Return of the King is my second favorite. Fellowship of the Ring is my third favorite, just because there is no like really iconic actiony scene like Minas Tirith or Helm's Deep that kind of puts it over the edge. Acting, couldn't ask for a better cast. Ian McKellen is fantastic. Viggo Mortensen, which is someone I have not seen in a lot of things since then. Fantastic. Elijah Wood, fantastic, perfect for these roles. Or a young Orlando Bloom. All right, let's hit the audience with your third of your top 5.
All right. I don't know if this was like a coincidence or anything. But you mentioned like rankings. You mentioned like picking like multiples from like a series or whatever. This one is also like a member of a series of movies. This one, number 3, I'm hitting you with Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith.
Interesting.
My number
choice.
3 favorite movie of all time.
I really support this. Okay,
thank you. Okay, good. So obviously the realm of Star Wars is like vast and complicated, and like we could spend 30 episodes talking about Star Wars. I don't know your history with Star Wars. I can tell you mine. Episode 3, I saw this in the theaters in 2005 when I was 7 years old. Like it was such a special and unique experience. It is actually like one of like my earliest memories at the movies that I can really like nail down. I have like a very clear picture of it in my head watching this movie. I think technically the first Star Wars movie I can even remember watching. I know that my parents took me to see The Phantom Menace when I was 1.
Wow.
That's not gonna like ring any cerebral.
I can't imagine Marco like being a crying baby in The Phantom Menace. Like
I was a great baby, very rarely cried. Unlike my sister, who I know will be listening to this. You cried a lot. I did not. Anyway,
a little sibling rivalry.
Right? Yeah. Always on the wrong fit. So Episode 3, like people have a lot to say about the prequel trilogy. We know, you and I, Eli, we know that like as Zoomers, like the prequels have a very special place in the heart of our generation.
Exactly.
It has experienced like a renaissance and a revival and like a real like newfound appreciation as being like a firm part of the Star Wars like canon and saga.
Yeah.
And like well beloved among people our age, and I have a few theories for that. So the big criticism you get from the prequels tends to come from like older generations, and those older generations, like there's a good chance like a lot of them remember seeing Star Wars in the theaters originally or during the re-release periods in the 80s and 90s, right?
Yeah.
So they grew up with those 3 Star Wars movies, and I'm not saying that the prequels are like cinematic masterpieces. They have many problems, and
yes.
I'm happy to acknowledge that. But they grew up with they saw those movies as like an add-on to Star Wars, and I think they have a hard time accepting that.
Yeah, you have a hard time accepting it's part of the Star Wars when you have a set. Yeah, I understand.
Right. But like these movies were Star Wars for me. Like this was the Star Wars I saw that I grew up with. I was 7 years old when Episode 3 came out. Like that is when you start watching Star Wars, you know?
Perfect.
And like when I think of Star Wars, like it is like inextricable. Like when I think of Star Wars, like I picture the walkers on Hoth and I picture the Death Star, but I also picture the battle on Geonosis. I picture Obi-Wan and Anakin duking it out on Mustafar.
Yeah.
Like that is like those are just as iconic. Like this is Star Wars to me as the original trilogy that I also grew up on. Like, and I love those movies too. Those are great movies.
Yeah, my parents showed me those. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like for sure. And like it is such a like a special cultural experience, a cultural exchange, right? Like you have your parents or like older siblings show you these movies, right? But they might have like snide remarks about the new movies that come out. But in like in your heart of hearts, like those movies are just as special. And like I
Yeah.
think now that like the Zoomer generation is old enough to be on computers and on meme things, right? Like they have become like memes and they've become like a very beloved part of the lore and of the Star Wars fandom, like in a way that like that just wasn't the case even just 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And like 10 years ago you couldn't mention you like the prequels because you'd be made fun of, but
Just shunned.
now you got people our age in like invading the airwaves saying no, the prequels are good actually, and we should like hold them up and like they're special, and like now you even have like Disney taking notice that there's demand for more prequel related content, because they've been signaling that they're gonna bring back like an Obi-Wan show on Disney Plus, and it's gonna have Hayden Christensen in it. So like it is a generational split, and Star Wars Episode 3 is like so special to me. I saw it in theaters. It is it's my favorite Star Wars movie. It's my third favorite movie of all time. Like there are so many like special scenes in this movie and like how emotional it is. And like I said, like it is not a movie without flaws. Like all of the prequel trilogy movies have some pretty big like story flaws, character flaws, casting flaws. Like all of that is notwithstanding, like the actual product of this movie is quite good.
Yes.
I would go as far to say. And like certainly, like I said, that's why I mentioned earlier that like I think a movie doesn't have to be critically acclaimed and objectively considered like one of the greatest to be one of your favorites, because like I would argue like Episode 3, it's not like a real snob would have a lot to say about it and really tear it apart, but like because it holds such a special place in my heart, like deserves to be number 3 easily, maybe even number 1. But obviously like when you rank your movies, like it's kind of hard to like figure out who's number 1. But yeah, Episode 3, great banger of a movie, like super special.
I'm gonna limit myself to 3 short things because there's so much. I think the Star Wars discussion would be so good as a separate segment. 3 short things. One, I think that these were really artistic. Like it felt like this was George Lucas telling the story he really wanted to see. There was less, cooks in the kitchen. There were fewer cooks in the kitchen than there were with the original series. Like he was the director, the writer. Like he was involved in every single part of the process of these movies. And some people say that's why they're flawed, but to me, I just really think that it was very artistic and it was very cool to see someone's vision just right there on the screen, doing what Star Wars the way he wanted to see it. 2, I think that I just wanted, like, I think that me and like a lot of other audiences going to these movies, I didn't see it in theaters. I actually saw it at my house. My mom, when it came out on DVD, my mom let me watch it, but she had covered my eyes in like the gruesome parts or whatever.
There are some tough parts of that movie. Yeah.
I will say, like, I think that everyone wanted this to be good, and like, I like the entire trilogy, the entire prequel trilogy. I'm just like wanting it to be good because I'm a young person and I like Star Wars, and like this is supposed to be our Star Wars. The first one, just like I just can't get into it. I like it. I love watching it. Like I'll watch it again. It's fun. I just can't say it's a good movie and I can't like it. And the
That's
second
fair.
one,
that's totally fair. Yeah.
The same thing. It's just like I like watching it and like I enjoy this experience, but I can't say that it's like a movie I like. Like I like it for nostalgia. I like it for the memes. I like it for like the story, the lore.
Completely fair. Yeah.
But the third one is just like it's so like relieving that it's actually a really good, well done, cool movie to me. And the last thing I'm going to say is I actually don't have Star Wars on my list, and it's very important to me. And like, I have seen it. I would say like that's one of the movies, a set of movies that I've seen like several times, like more than probably any other movies, even movies on this list. The only reason I don't put this on here is because for me, Star Wars has become such, you mentioned like Disney spinoffs, all this stuff. Star Wars to me is just so much more beyond the movies at this point in my life. Like I don't know how much you've gone into the TV shows, but like the Clone Wars, so good. Like the Rebels TV show, so good. Animated stuff, so good. The Mandalorian, super solid too. Like amazing TV shows. And that's not even going into like the video games that I've played, the comics that I read when I was younger.
Oh man, we could spend an hour talking about the Star Wars video games and like all of our respective experiences with the Star Wars canon. I so agree with you. All right, Eli, we're in the home stretch here. Let's get to number 2. What do you got?
Number 2, this is kind of like I don't know how to say it, like come from behind, because this only recently like
it's a dark horse.
Only recently did I remember like, oh wait, this is my favorite movie. A little background: I watched this movie when I was young. I really liked it when I was young. I watched it several times when I was young, but I had stopped watching it until this past semester for my politics and film course. I was like challenged for a paper to write about like a type of film that tackles a type of like political issue. So and over several generations, right? So like 70s movies, comparing how this particular political issues tackled in 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever decade you want to choose, 3 decades. I chose Shawshank Redemption as a depiction of the 90s. Obviously, it's set in like I think the 40s or 50s, but a depiction from the 90s of the prison industrial complex, like prisons in general. And I thought so. I'm not going to get into completely in the politics, but obviously this is a very political like movie, right?
Yeah.
Like, it happened in the 90s. That's kind of when criminal justice issues are kind of coming to the forefront. It's such just like a fantastic like emotional story, personal story of like this character. And the director, Frank Darabont, I have not seen him do a ton of other projects, but this is just was such an amazing adaptation of the Stephen King short story, Shawshank Redemption. And if you haven't read the short story, I don't know if have you seen the movie?
I actually have not, but I know it's like one of the greatest. Yeah,
you got to see the movie and you got to read the short story because it's really short story. And personally, like I, as a person who typically likes the novelization better than the dramatization, it's flipped for me because the movie goes so much more in depth than the short story does. But it's just such amazing themes of basically the entire movie is about this wrongfully convicted person and his kind of like the prison's Shawshank, and I guess it's his redemption. Through this process of going through the prison for decades, he's in prison in this horrible, mistreated, like horrible conditions prison. This was in the 50s. Obviously it starts in the 50s and goes like to different decades. But it's just this kind of amazing story of his like resilience to the crushing walls of this like prison, and like how his hope is really what sets him free. Because the story goes in all this like he has a very elaborate escape attempt that's takes place over many years, that he escapes this institution that's like hell on earth, this hellish institution. Over many years he plans his escape. And not to spoil it too much, but it's so relieving and powerful that like what really helped him like escape was his resilience. Like it's all about like the resilience of the human spirit and like kind of opposition to these like powerful forces around you. In a metaphorical way, the only reason he survived was because of his resilience. But in a much more like, they show it in such a real way that like slowly chipping against the walls of this institution to find his way to freedom. Just kind of amazing, triumph of the human spirit. It's a feel-good movie, even though it's really dark and really sad. Like there are some very dark moments in this movie. Like I'm not going to go into too many details, but like there are like themes of like sexual assault, violence in the prison industrial complex. I watched it for the first time. Obviously, it meant a lot to me. It was a great movie. But the second time I'm watching it this past semester, I don't want to like compare my situation, but like we were living in a pandemic, right? And like we were kind of like stuck inside, and it really did. I was definitely losing hope, kind of in that period of time that I was watching it. And it was like very like tough being inside all the time and tough being cramped up. But just kind of watching this movie, it just gave me a lot of hope and taught me to be like very resilient, and taught that like, my resilience could kind of like set me free a bit and like just keep on pressing on. And like, it was just very powerful movie to see at the time that I saw it, which was, first time a long time ago. But the more important time watching it was just very recently. All right, what's your number 2?
Okay. I'll give it a little bit of prelude before I mention it. So kind of like yours, this was also a bit of like not a movie I grew up with, and not a movie that I ever expected that like when I saw it, it would end up being like one of my all-time favorites. I saw it for the first time about close to 2 years ago, and it's like one of the most well-done movies of all time. And I'm smiling. I think Eli probably knows where I'm going with this.
Yeah. I'm surprised it's number 2.
Yeah, yeah, we'll get to that. I saw it for the first time a few years ago, and it just floored me with like how great I thought it was, how great like I thought the story was, the interactions between the characters, the special effects are like on a completely different planet. The soundtrack, the score, like for a while, like I was just like obsessed with this movie. And like today, it's still like one of my all-time favorites. Obviously, it's my number 2. And that movie is James Cameron's 1997 epic Titanic.
All right. No surprise over here.
No surprise.
Only surprise is it's number 2. But
if you knew me, you knew I loved this movie. Bordering on like just downright annoying how much I love this movie. I obviously have quieted down significantly since then. Obviously, obsessions wane, right? But like this is still like an incredible, like close to like a cinematic masterpiece as I could give it. In that respect, I actually think it's kind of underrated, even though it was the number 1 highest grossing movie of all time for like 12 years. I actually think it's quite underrated because people don't really give it like the time of day because it was so successful anyway.
Yeah.
And like they think it's like, oh, it's super mainstream. Like how could it be any good? And there are some elements of it that I would criticize as well. Nothing so big that I would like really like knock it down a lot of pegs, because I think the actual final product of the movie is so strong. It is so compelling, so interesting that like I don't see how this movie is still not in like the pantheon of like maybe top 200 greatest movies of all time. Like for people not to consider it that, I think is criminal, even though I know it had crazy critical and audience success.
Yeah.
People today like kind of look at it in a different way than they did in the late 90s and the early 2000s. Like I tend to think that just the sheer like size of it all is underappreciated and underrated today, because almost all of the effects are practical effects and not computer effects. Although it did have some groundbreaking CGI at the time, it should be noted. But most of it,
I just love the way you said that. Like, it should be noted.
Well, I'm speaking from like almost like an expert's level of knowledge here, because I know so much about it, right? But the practical effects are just out of this world, insanely good. Like, if you have not seen this movie and you only know it as like, oh, this is just like some dumb romance, like complete, like get that out of your head. It is not just a romance. It's an action movie. It's a disaster movie. It's a horror movie. Like, it has all of those elements in one bow in like different like quadrants of the movie. Like, the first part of it is like just like a drama, like kind of like just a silly kind of romance movie. And then it gets to like the most like anxiety inducing like hour and a half of your life as like things are just getting worse and worse and worse. And then it goes into like full disaster action as like our main heroes are like going through the ship, dodging water, swimming, are they going to die? Are they going to do this? What's going to happen? And then like all like horror like things start happening because like the lights go out, and now we're getting into like the really like most dangerous like scary parts of the movie. Like there's so many layers to this that like I said, if you think it's just like a by the book romance movie, which it is, it isn't just that. Like look, like the plot is not spectacularly complicated or anything. It is very by the books, but like I think the characters are quite compelling. I haven't even mentioned like who's in this movie. Like Leonardo DiCaprio again, every man, like boyish charm. Like if you're a guy like his age, like how can you not see yourself in him, and like wanting to win the girl, trying to be like relatable, but goofy, but also serious, but also talented. Like he's just like what every like young guy just wants to be. Kate Winslet, like amazing. Like she does like an absolute like jaw-dropping performance, like she's absolutely great. Billy Zane as the villain, like what better casting than that, And you've got like great characters like on the interim, and like the captain's great. Like everything is just great here. Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on and on about this, but I want to know what you think, actually, because I don't know. Have you seen this movie?
I've seen. So I'll give you a little background. I haven't seen it all. Just very briefly, like I remember my friends went to see it in middle school because it was like re-released in theaters or
right
something like that.
in 2012, right?
Yeah, and I was like gonna go, and then they like went without me, and I was really sad. I think that left a very bad taste in my mouth. So that was gonna be the first time I ever saw it, right?
That's valid. Yeah, that's
a couple
valid.
of years later, it came out on Titanic came out on Netflix, and I don't know if you remember that, but that was kind of a big deal. Like when it came out, like it was just like kind of a big deal, like this really great movie on Netflix on this like very popular streaming platform. I tried watching it. I was by myself. I tried watching it, and like I have to tell you, like I just couldn't like get in, sink my teeth into it. Couldn't sink my teeth into it. I want to, and I want to try it again. You know, I'm like a little bit older, and like it's just tough now that I know exactly what happens, and I've seen so many scenes from the movie that it's like so spoiled for me.
I don't disagree with you there. I kind of went at it from a different like perspective that like I knew what the scenes were, but I couldn't like place them in my head like what really happens or anything. So I did kind of go into it with fresh eyes because I knew obviously I knew all about it. I knew what happened and I knew who died and who didn't die. But like I didn't know like in the order. I didn't know like what the lines were. Like I didn't know a lot of stuff. And like it's funny like going into it, I was like, oh, that's where that comes from. That's where that line comes from. And like, oh wait, this is the movie where, you know, this happens. And you know, it's funny, but like obviously like you know, like before you saw it or you tried to see it, like you knew a great deal more about it than I did, which kind of makes it like harder for you to like get invested in it when you feel like you know everything that's gonna happen. But I would say like, you know, give it another shot. But like, you know, if not, then not, right? But like
I definitely want to like it. Like I definitely want to watch it and like it and like enjoy it for sure. I do think the concept's really cool. Like I watched the beginning, and so I understand like the whole like it's memories. Like I'm not to spoil it too much, but like it's based on like the memory of this one person and like you know, that kind of like I like that, and I like that it's historical. It's you know it's not obviously not like not something you know straight out of the textbook, but it is historical, and I think that's cool. So I definitely want to watch it and want to like it.
And visually, it's like very like it's pretty close to accurate, like based on what they thought happened in 1997. But like now, like the science has changed a little bit on like what actually like exactly happened to like the breakup and the sinking and everything. But like to what we knew in 1997, like it is dead on, like super accurate.
That's pretty cool. Like that's cool in itself, just from that historical standpoint.
Let's hear it for number one, Eli. Number one, like your favorite movie ever.
This movie is like very powerful and like emotionally. I don't know. It meant a lot to me when I watched it. I've seen it. This is one of the ones I've seen 3 times so far. I believe it came out in 2017. Might have to fact check that. It was, you know, there's in the past like 5 years, I would say that I think there's 2 movies that I've cried in. You know, I definitely chose an emotional, like hard hitting one for this one. 2 movies that I cried in. I was debating putting both on the list, but I decided to kind of like narrow it down to one of the 2. Just because, you know, I also consider this list kind of not only being my favorites, but also being representative of me, right? So this one, I watched this with my family when it came out on Netflix. This is like a direct to Netflix movie, one of like the pioneering first ones. It's a foreign language film by the director, I think it was Alfonso Cuarón.
Yeah, I know him well.
Yeah, it's Roma. I believe it came out in 2017, direct to Netflix release. Spanish language film. You know, and I'm not fluent. I do speak like you know Spanish a bit. I'm not a fluent speaker whatsoever. It's a Spanish language film, so it was in subtitles. But that just shows you how amazing the acting really was on this film. It was a very interesting film. I rewatched it recently for last semester, actually, for another project I had. I was watching a lot of movies last semester. For my Spanish class, actually, it was like to watch a foreign language film and like to write like a brief summary of it, basically, in Spanish. But I rewatched it and like, you know, when you watch something for the first time, you kind of expect to cry because it's like emotionally and you're not expecting it and it's like powerful. But I cried again, like just as hard the second time because it was such an amazing scene. Not to spoil it too much. I'm not going to give you too much of the plot, but basically it follows this woman who is, it explores a lot of like class conflict a bit and like family dynamic a bit. But this woman she's like kind of like the maid to this like affluent Mexican family in Mexico City, Mexico. This is, you know, based on Alfonso Cuarón's childhood. Actually,
Okay.
growing up in Mexico City. I believe it's Mexico City. I might not be right about that. I might
Okay.
just been assuming Mexico City, but let's just say in the city, kind of based on his childhood experiences with his own helper, like nanny, maid, whatever you want to call it. She was a like native woman, native Mexican person in this family is obviously more Spanish blood, more physically whiter,
Right. Yeah.
and it's kind of like finding her role within this family. And this family is in a very tumultuous situation personally. And not to spoil the ending too much, but the ending of one of the characters is put in one of the young characters, one of the children in the family is put in a life-threatening situation. I don't know how much I want to spoil it, but
No, definitely don't, because I know of this. I know of this movie. I knew it was like considered like one of the greatest movies of that year. So
it
I
was
definitely
so
want to make
fantastic.
sure I see it, especially now that I'm on a bit of a movie watching kick. So like I definitely don't want to like know too many of the nitty gritty. But I do want to hear more about like how it impacted you
No
personally.
spoilers, not going to give too much of anything, but like it wasn't an action. It wasn't the action. It wasn't like not a fun movie on any count whatsoever. Really,
Mhm.
tough to watch. Really tough to watch at certain points. But the reason it meant a lot to me was one because it like elicited such an emotional reaction. But two, I was watching it with family and like with my, with my dad, with my aunt, and my grandma was around as well, and all of them, being born and raised in Mexico, kind of like seeing their experiences and like very personal, like them talking about kind of like, oh, this and that, and like their experiences in like similar environments at some points was like really powerful. And just like it really does come down to like the main actress. She goes through this journey, very emotional journey, very difficult journey, very like journey of like womanhood that like taught me a lot about like womanhood. I think it's just this like very powerful journey. And just to cap it off a bit, the actress actually she's a native woman, and she had zero acting experience, I believe, and they just
Oh
picked
wow.
her, and she did such an amazing delivery and like role and like personality, and it was just a very really amazing like personal movie. Very just a can't say enough good things about this. Very emotional roller coaster. Let's get your number one.
My number one. Yeah, a bit more of like we're kind of back in like the childhood nostalgia train.
Okay.
Although like this movie, like obviously, like in my opinion, like it stands up like very, 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 very well
Mhm.
on its own merit. But I'm gonna go with the first Back to the Future movie. This
Interesting.
is Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, both at like their absolute best pinnacle, like amazing, amazing. Back to the Future, like if you don't know, I don't even know how. It's like one of the most popular movies ever. It's got a very well known sequel, Back to the Future 2, with all like the 2015 futuristic stuff that they predict, right? That one is a bit more of like the glitzy glamour, like this is the movie everyone knows because of those scenes. But Back to the Future 1, I think, is a better movie. I think it's the best of that trilogy. And like, it's just got everything about it is done perfectly. The pacing is perfect. The special effects are very good. The dialogue is excellent, like witty. It's fast paced. It's got little bits and bops like everywhere. There are all these like hidden messages that like every like listicle article has like done already. Like, oh, top 10 things you didn't notice in Back to the Future 1. Like, but like it has that because it is so richly crafted by the cinematographers, the editors, the writers, the producers. Like they're like, we're gonna plant all of these things, tie the movie together, right? But like, but barring all of that, it is just like a great and simple sci-fi comedy, with terrific actors, great writing, and like a story that's really engaging. And again, characters that are really engaging. Like obviously, like Marty McFly is like a great character, but Doc Brown is like an interesting, sympathetic, like scientist character. It's just like it's in a way that like you wouldn't expect it to work, right? But it
Mhm.
works because the like everything about it is so captivating. Like you don't even question like why is a 17-year-old high schooler friends with a old man
Yeah.
who's like a weird like kooky scientist. But like it just works
It can't
because
be. Yeah. It's she's
it
accept it.
Exactly. You accept it because it works so well. Not every movie can do that. Not every movie is strong enough for you to ignore some of those weirder like plot considerations. Like
Mhm.
in a worse movie, you'd be like you would never stop questioning the reality of the movie. But like since
Mhm.
this movie's so good and written so well, you completely excuse it. That I think is the sign of a fantastic, great movie. Um, and again, like just the pure nostalgia of it. Obviously, I wasn't alive when it was released, but like my father introduced me to all the movies from that trilogy, and like it has always stuck with me. When I was a kid, two was my favorite, but like now as an adult, one I think is clearly the better movie in terms of the dialogue, the story, everything about it. Obviously, two is still really good, and if I had like a top 50 movies, it would definitely be there. But like one is like the place. It's like the one that like earns the number one spot
Mhm.
for me. Do you have a history with this movie?
So my history, this is similar to Catch Me If You Can, because this is another movie that I have
Are
not
you
seen.
kidding me, Eli?
I'm sorry. I'm
Are
sorry.
you Back to the Future?
I know it's supposed to be
What?
so good. Like I can't believe I didn't watch this movie. I think part of the reason I didn't watch this movie because it wasn't presented. Like my parents were a little bit older when this movie came out, and I guess they didn't like present because my parents are like slightly older. They had me when they were slightly older, so I think it wasn't presented to me as a kid in the same way that it was for a lot of my friends. Like my one of my best friends, like he swears by this movie, and honestly, like you know, yeah, he's been telling me to watch it forever, and I haven't seen it, and now I feel like I'm too old for it, but I just know exactly what
No,
happens.
no. You're definitely not too old
I
for it.
know the characters. I know Michael J. Fox. I know, I'll definitely check it out again. Like I always feel bad with Titanic and Back to the Future, just because it is so like you're supposed to have seen this movie, right? Like
Right.
everyone's seen it.
We mentioned a few episodes ago, this is not a religious podcast. But let's get into it. Let's get a little bit spiritual, a little divine
A little
on the wrong fit.
divine, spiritual, satanic in this case.
On the wrong fit. Let's get into it.
Let's get wicked.
Perpetual hitmaker, Lil Nas X. You know him, you love him. I love him. I think he's great.
I like him. He's the pulse of the youth as of right now, the youth of America.
Not gonna lie, yes. So he he's got a big hit right now. Montero, parentheses, Call Me By Your Name. It's like number one song of America right now. It's a great song, fantastic. Like he just doesn't stop making hits. It's actually unbelievable. But to like build up hype, he's got a really controversial music video. Not controversial to me because this is not the kind of thing that bothers me.
Yeah.
But controversial to America's conservatives. It's not a political podcast. So to like work with that, he has signed on to a collaboration with the streetwear company called Mischief. And they have produced a alteration, a modification, a mod of a Nike Air Max 97 sneaker, one of my favorite Nike Air Maxes.
Great body.
And they have made it like black and red, Satan themed, demon themed, demonic, because the music video is quite demonic as well for that song. And the term, they're called blood shoes because the shoes actually have contained within them a drop of real actual human blood taken from Mischief employees, which is really weird and kind of a biohazard if we really think about it.
Yeah.
This is not a Nike signed off collab. This is a very unofficial thing. But for Lil Nas X to partner with this company to produce these very provocative shoes, obviously it promoted and generated a lot of social media interest. So that's all well and good. Nike goes on to do some legal action, some cease and desist kind of stuff to get them, because obviously this is not an official Nike collab. Nike would never do anything like this. Although we could get into this because I have a few thoughts on that whole situation. So Nike gets involved. To my knowledge, it's actually settled quite amicably in relative terms. No one's getting sued or anything. It got settled, through arbitration. So that's pretty good, right? There's not going to be a protracted legal battle or anything. But this kind of made headlines a few days ago for Nike's behavior and like what's the harm in letting this happen, and Lil Nas X being in the news and everything. Obviously, of course, like always, we'll have a link in the show notes for that, so you can go and read up on it, take a look at these shoes, because these are pretty sick
Pretty
shoes.
sick looking shoes, man. Like it's like a decent colorway. Disregarding the satanic whatever, like the political controversy.
I'd wear the hell out of those shoes. I would wear them. So, and I'm a like a lightly religious guy. I'm currently in between denominations right now. I'm trying to decide like where.
Think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of decide where my new home in Christianity is going to be. But I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian guy. Yeah. I'm very moderate. Very I almost never mention it around my friends. It always comes as a surprise when they find out that I'm religious, right? But this is not a thing that bothers me. This is not a thing that I think should bother most people, if anybody.
Yeah, really.
It's obviously it's provocative. That's the whole point.
Yeah, it's pop art, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's great. I think it's really interesting. Although we'll get into where Nike comes into this in a second, I think. But I want to get your thoughts on this whole controversy.
It's very interesting. So this is like my thought process, and this is kind of like my, I haven't seen this take been put off a lot. So this is just what I'm going to intro with. Is I think it's very interesting to see this outcry from America's like right. Mm-hmm. Right. It's interesting to see this like from the America's right, like religious right, like it's obviously conservatives are like no Satan, blah blah blah. I'm sure they're gonna burn his records or whatever they do nowadays. It's interesting to see the progression of when did Old Town Road come out? I think it was 2019. 19, yeah.
Yep.
Like 2019, he is bringing back this like I don't want to offend anybody, but this dead genre, right? Like country music's he's modernizing this genre. It's right. Like, bringing it into, the 21st century.
Totally.
And he was beloved for that, I believe. And that's like what Old Town Road is what made him, 100%. He does different versions with different country music stars. Billy Ray Cyrus did a version with him, right? I think there was other country music people that kind of dropped on. But like he was kind of like, not like I don't think he was probably beloved by America's right wing, whatever. But I'm sure that it was like if you're more like country type person, like I can imagine for a while Lil Nas X was kind of more your speed, and it's just interesting now like seeing that go complete the opposite direction. Obviously, I'm not saying Old Town Road was like exclusively a hit for like rural people. It was a biggest song in the world for weeks on weeks, smashing so many records, like an incredible, amazing song. And it's just crazy that this is kind of what he's following it up with. Obviously there was other hits like Panini and like whatever afterwards.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like he has never stopped making hits, and like so he goes from Old Town Road, which caught headlines not only because it was a genre bender, but also because it was so successful. Like the longest running #1 of all time.
Incredible record to break.
To now grabbing headlines for something so like. I mean, Americans love a good moral panic. Now we're back into like demons and Satanism, like infecting our young and everything. Like now we're back into that, which is very #throwback to the 80s, man.
Yeah, really. It does feel like an argument from a different generation. Like,
yeah.
I'm a somewhat religious person. I don't have any problem with these shoes. That's
no, totally not. Or the music video or what he's trying to do. Like obviously, like it's just some good fun and it's some good imagery. Like. It's artistic imagery. There's nothing to be offended on by, like, from a religious perspective or a moralistic perspective. Like,
there's nothing wrong. It's absolutely right. Yeah.
Like there are so many worse morals being propagated by America's like right-leaning leaders every day today.
Country music. Like there's some problematic lyrics in there. Not to get too much.
Yeah. No. So Nike's response. They kind of caught a lot of flack for the cease and desist and some of the threats of legal action that they took.
Bad look for Nike, in my opinion.
Bad look for Nike. However, I'm going to come down on the side here. Nike have to do this. They have no choice but to do that because they run the risk of losing protections and they run the risk of, I suppose, brand dilution. Now, you and I, Eli, are very like in the know with this kind of thing. Like you and I are sneakerheads, and even just being like a person on social media that's quite involved, like you would know that this is not a Nike shoe, so we don't like.
Yeah, and they have nothing to do with the shoe. It's just bought the body, like made the colorway, put the blood in.
Right, we know that, but it is not outside the realm of possibility to imagine a whole bunch of like dumb Americans from thinking that this is like an official Nike collab, particularly from people that are inclined to like distrust Nike after their collaborations with, Kaepernick and, things from a couple years ago, right? For the past few years, really, the political positions that Nike has taken. We're not going to get too deep into Nike and politics or anything.
Not a political podcast.
Right. But like Nike have like that incentive, right? They cannot let their brand be diluted, because they stand to lose a lot from that. Yeah. So on that note, I'm quite sympathetic to Nike as much as you can be for such a massive company. I'm not trying to I'm not trying to lick Nike's boot. I'm not trying to lick Nike's forces or anything, but like, yeah, thanks. So there is a bit of that. What I like is that, again, it was settled amicably. It did not become a big protracted legal drama. So I will give props to Nike and to Mischief for that. This is where I have some beef with Mischief, the streetwear company, because they also did earlier this year, or last year, a while ago, they did the Jesus shoes with holy water in it.
Yeah.
I didn't know that that was from them. And it's funny to me because they go on the record, right? So they're on the defensive, right? Because Nike was going after them. And they start coming out with all of these quotes about like, these were all parodies of the collaboration culture, the Jesus shoes and the demon shoes. And I'm like, okay, you cannot come out with parody of the collab culture when you are doing a collab with the guy with the biggest song in the world right now. Like, you can't come out against...
It's not you're not parodying that. Like, it's just...
Like, don't mislead your purpose. Like, you did a collab with a great artist.
It was cool.
With a great song.
I liked it.
It's cool. It's great. You ran into some legal problems. You knew that would happen. Fine. Fair enough, right? Like, life goes on. But you can't come out and now suddenly, like, hate on Nike and the other streetwear like sneaker brands for like the collab culture, because I gotta tell you, like, if Lil Nas X approached Nike for a collaboration, I think that could happen. I think that probably would.
Not in the same way. I don't think there'd be blood in the shoes. I don't think there would be a pentagram on the shoes.
And like, I love Lil Nas X for that provocative stance that Nike.
He could have made more money probably with a pentagram or with a Nike shoe that doesn't have the blood, doesn't have the pentagram. But I think he kind of like wanted to do it for maybe artistic reasons, maybe for like popularity reasons, but still, it's like, it's what he wanted to do.
Yeah, and that I 100% respect. But but again, like, oftentimes when we're pushed to the defensive, like, we say a lot of really dumb things, and like, that's a really
just like, well, it's a parody. Yeah,
that's a really dumb thing to say for being a streetwear company in the first place with lots of high priced merchandise. This was not.
To me, it's like the parody defense is just like almost laughable. Of like, oh, we're parodying. It's like, dude, you're a streetwear company, like, right? Like, you're like a this is like, you're not parodying it. You're part of the system, And it just reminds me of like, trying to like find. I don't know if you're familiar with the show Nathan For You.
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, but it's like the whole thing with there's this idea he has for dumb Starbucks. Basically, long story short, he copies Starbucks, but he says it's dumb Starbucks, and that's like he can copy their brand logo because it's a parody law. And it just feels exactly like this kind of ridiculous idea of just like, oh, it's a parody, so like obviously we have the legal footing that we can parody Nike.
Right.
It's like, no, that's not what's happening here. You just bought some Nikes, you put some blood in it, and you tried to sell it for $1,000. Like, just be honest with what you did.
Yeah, and I'm okay with parodies. Like, I don't want to be like those guys that are, again, like, I'm not like a big lover of like what Nike does as a business necessarily, but it's more just like this seemed like such a reactionary way to defend your product and to defend what you were trying to do. Like, you were trying to be provocative, and you were collaborations are like huge right now. Like, they've been huge for a while in the streetwear sneaker community and in pop culture. I mean, the original like Yeezy and Adidas is like the mother of all collaborations, and like there are so many others that I can't even mention, right? So like, just like, you were profiting off of that and you wanted to like be cash in on that, fine, fair enough, right? Like, but like, you knew this would happen from Nike, be that as it may. But then to come out with that defense is like, seems very disingenuous to me, because to anyone looking, it was obvious you were trying to cash in on how popular Lil Nas X is right now.
This is like almost the Taylor Swift podcast, I feel like. It started out with, folklore, like that was just, that just kind of was our inaugural podcast, I believe, of like, that was kind of part of the formation of our podcast, was like, we're going to review like one of the types of things that we do is we're going to review folklore, and we did, and it was amazing.
The album was amazing, or was the section amazing?
Our review was the definitive review. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Because the album, I have a few things to say about the album, but
I know.
Go listen to episode 1.
We'll save that for. I don't know. You can go back and watch. I think it was our first episode, right?
Yeah, episode 1.
Check out episode 1. Evermore review was also popping.
Yep.
Taylor Swift was such a part of our podcast. We couldn't help but review the Fearless Taylor's version. Spinning came out this past month. We me and my friend group have been spinning this pretty heavily.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's I, especially with the. I think this was. Well, we'll get into it in a sec, but this was just so iconic. I can't. We've talked about Taylor Swift. We have different opinions on Taylor Swift than maybe a lot of people, but I can't help but admit that this is just so iconic. This was so iconic for my life.
There's a lot to say about this, and before I get into that, Taylor Swift is such a big part of the podcast. In less than a year, this is our 3rd Taylor Swift review, which is kind of a weird thing to say. And I know there's more of these Taylor's versions coming down the pipe. So if you have no idea what we're talking about, this is not an album with new music from Taylor Swift, although some of the songs are new from the deluxe version.
Mm-hmm.
This is a re-recording of Taylor Swift's 2008 record, Fearless. This is her 2nd album from 2008, and she has re-recorded it, reproduced it, and given us some tracks from her back vault that have not been released, throw them on at the very end, and has given them to us right now in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
First thing you might be wondering is why, right?
Yes.
Why is she doing this, right?
I think that's the most important question for all this, honestly.
Is it just more money? Taylor Swift wants more of my money. She wants my money. No, it's complicated, and I think I'll do my best. And obviously, Eli, chime in if you've got details to bring up the rear. It's really complicated, actually. It's actually a bit of a he said, she said debacle where it's hard to figure out who's definitively in the right. Although I have a lot more sympathy towards Taylor Swift on this one.
Absolutely, yeah.
So here's the skinny. Taylor Swift, in 2006, she signs a record deal with a record company that would eventually be sold to Big Machine Records, which is the name of her previous record label, right? She signs a deal for her first 8 albums, which takes her all the way to 2017's Reputation. From then on, the label owns her masters, but it was a understanding that she would get to renegotiate for them or something. And then some record label drama ensues where the record label gets sold to some guy named Scooter Braun, who's a bit of a villain in this story, a bit of a mustache twirler kind of guy here.
I don't know too much about this situation, but I do this name Scooter Braun. This just sounds like a villainous,
yeah, but kind of like a dorky villain, kind of like a Vector from Despicable Me,
Scooter, then that's just a dorky name,
Yeah, there was a bit of intrigue from who was the record label head from Big Machine said we won't sell the label and your masters without telling you. That's what Taylor Swift was assured. That has been cast into doubt from the he said, she said on this front. So basically what ended up happening was Scooter Braun, this big, music industry guy, now owns the masters, the original masters of Taylor Swift's albums from 2006 to 2017. Again, that's her self-titled Fearless, 1989, Reputation, so on and so forth. A lot of records, a lot of hits, lots of number ones, lots of super well-known popular songs from those records.
Iconic,
now,
yeah.
Included in these negotiations and all this intrigue was Taylor Swift's ability to actually re-record her music down to the lyrics, down to the production stylizations, and that's really key because even though she doesn't own her masters, the people that own her masters, they have the right to actually use those songs and license them to anybody who is willing to pay for them, right? That includes for commercials, placement in movies, and also, obviously, on the streaming front. You stream those records, the money goes to her label, although that I'm not 100% sure how that's broken down. And obviously we will include links in the show notes to the full like comprehensive drama, right?
The whole story.
Because along the way it involves like Kanye West and Kim Kardashian, and I don't know, I can't remember how it all plays down. But basically Taylor Swift wants to undercut those masters, her own original work from years and years ago. She wants to undercut that because she's not the one taking advantage of those songs being used in commercials and movies and being streamed and everything, right? From those songs from years ago, undercutting them by releasing her own re-recorded Taylor's versions of those records, right? So her fans can stream them, and that any new TV producer guy that wants to use a song like You Belong With Me in a thing, they'll have the option to actually use this new master that Taylor has full control over. She has announced her intention to fully re-record and re-release all of her records from, again, 2006 to Reputation, which is a lot of work, a huge body of work. Like I said, like any of those Taylor Swift hits from the late 2000s, mid-10s, all of that is included there. So we have just now gotten like the first taste of that in the Fearless re-release that came out a few weeks ago, and we're here to review it.
Yeah, with the name, Fearless, Taylor's version, like that's just, to me, that's so powerful. Just Taylor's version, like it's just, it does mean a lot. Like it's just like, this is, I feel like on one hand it's her like kind of claiming is like, I own this,
right,
and
right.
On the second hand, it's also powerful that her saying it's like the definitive version, basically. I think, and
exactly,
it is kind of entering, and I thought kind of get less meta of it, actually talking about the music of it. It was very interesting to hear her kind of do this kind of line between like changing it and like modernizing it, almost like making it contemporary to contemporary Taylor, versus like wanting to keep it, these are iconic things that everyone wants to listen to. Like when I hear Love Story, like that kind of really brings me back, and like I kind of want to hear it sound like you're thinking about, like you mentioned putting in a movie, like you want to like pay tribute to your original work, and people want to hear the original Love Story, so you don't want to change it that much. The main thing, talking about, again, the music itself, the main thing I felt like she changed was her voice seemed so much fuller and more adult. And secondly, it seemed like a greater emphasis on the instrumentation in this. Like I felt like it was more pronounced.
Yeah, like to be clear, like these are not re-recordings in the way that like other pop stars tend to like grab their hits from the past and like throw on brand new production that is totally different and change their dynamics and everything. These are pretty much straight reproductions of her old work.
Yeah.
The only thing that really changed might be that the production sounds a little fuller, a little crisper, a little cleaner, right?
Modern,
because of the technological progress that has been made. Even in this era, like there's a lot that has changed about music production, and certainly her voice has changed a good deal.
Yeah.
And you can feel it.
She's an adult now,
Yeah, and you can feel it. Like these are, her voice is more mature. It sounds a lot fuller, a lot less youthful, so to speak. Although I'm not saying she's old; she's very young. But I mean, like obviously she's not 18, 20 anymore, right?
It's hard
That's
to believe
okay.
13 years ago that this is when the original came out. It's just so hard to believe.
Yeah, and Eli mentioned earlier, like these songs are like of our respective like childhoods. Love Story, You Belong With Me, 15, and all these other tracks. Like these are like nostalgic 15. As hell.
I know. I was never, I was, kind of a nerdier, younger person. Like 2008, I was 9 years old, kind of at the end of my elementary school career, right?
Yeah.
And if you can call it a career. But it was just, when I was listening to it, it was just kind of baffling. And I actually listened to Taylor's version and I compared it to the original version because, it just brought me back to those memories. And I kind of wanted to like for a couple, not all the songs, but for a couple songs, I just like wanted to hear both side by side.
Totally.
But it was just like so crazy that I wasn't expecting to, like, I was kind of nerdy. I didn't know all the popular music at that time. It's just crazy to me, like how I knew almost all of these songs, like off this album of this artist that wasn't even my particular it wasn't, you're a 9-year-old boy. It's not geared towards you. Like, this album is not geared toward 9-year-old boys. If anything,
Right.
it's, geared to a more feminine audience, right? And it's crazy that I just knew, like, record after record, I was like humming along as though this is like an old memory that I had, because it was an old memory that I had. I just think it's crazy the power that has.
Like you said, like I didn't grow up like listening, like bumping this album in
Yeah,
my
yeah.
iPod, my MP3 player. I didn't grow up doing that. There are plenty of like, women today that like grew up with that music from when they were kids, and like they know all of the songs front to back, and like they will
Mm.
know like exactly like what's a little bit different about these versions versus the older ones. So
Yeah.
when I listened to this, I just, I only listened to Taylor's version. I didn't really go back to the older ones, aside from just a few like point comparisons that I saw
Mhm.
like on YouTube and on social media. So I kind of went into it with a pretty fresh outlook. Like obviously I knew the singles, and I really love them. I love Love Story and You Belong With Me are great, great pop songs that are like historic, impactful, iconic, whatever you want to say. Um, but I went into this pretty cold, pretty like I don't really know a lot about Taylor Swift and like this part of her catalog. Like I
Mhm.
know her more recent stuff like pretty well, but this like older stuff like from her pop country phase, like I'm not super familiar with it aside from the hits, right? So I was excited to like actually go into it with like this fresh mindset. We haven't really gotten down to like what do you think of the record, and let's get to that now.
I liked it. Like, if I'm gonna,
Okay.
kind of give it a simple thing, I liked it. It's hard to separate the nostalgia, because it was a weird, like, it wasn't like, it was just weird, like, just hearing these songs that were nostalgia, but I didn't even know I had nostalgia for. But like,
Right.
it's hard to separate that. But I just thought it was like really like, her comparing the two, seeing them side by side. It's just the progression is like really interesting to see. Like, she didn't want to change it too much, but she really did. The things she did change, like obviously she had to re-record her vocals and her instrumentation, like both just seem improved. Like, it's hard to like, these were already iconic pop songs that I liked. I didn't even know that I liked them, but I liked them and I knew them.
Right.
But I do feel like even she improved on them. Like, her singing just like, she was much more adult, much more mature with her singing. The instrumentation was much more pronounced, I feel like, and less like generic.
Hmm.
Definitely in the original one, it felt like a little bit more generic. Not as a bad thing, like not as like, it doesn't have to be like super, well crafted, produced, whatever. But it definitely felt like this was more of a work of art for sure, a work of art by an artist. And like, I mean that
Right.
not in the sense of like a recording artist. I mean that's in the sense of like an artist. Like, she put, she was trying to make art with this. It's just hard to separate, the story from it, the nostalgia from it, and just listen to the song, because the story is so amazing. And like, I'm happy for her, like kind of getting her music back. Like, I know it's a he said she said, but it seems like, I'm with Taylor or whatever.
Right. Right.
But it's hard to separate that from the music, and it's hard to separate my nostalgia from the music. But I just did enjoy it. I did, like, I definitely felt a little weird. So the two places I was listening to this, and this is kind of like where I like to listen to music,
Mm.
is like walking around on my headphones. It's just like, I just like walking around listening to music. Who doesn't? And
Right.
in the car, like, I really like listening in the car. It's my favorite place to listen to it, just because you're getting the sound from all around. Like, it's like good quality speakers in your car.
Right.
Um, I just like doing that. But I did feel like a little, like, I don't want this to sound like too toxic masculinity, but like, I did feel it was like, these are very youthful, feminine songs, right?
Yeah.
And I did feel a little bit like, weird how much I enjoyed it, if that makes sense. And like,
Hmm.
you should allow yourself. There's nothing toxic about enjoying. There's nothing like, doesn't make you any less of a man to enjoy
No, definitely not.
anything.
Well, I know where you're coming from. Like she has made music now that you enjoy it. Like if you do enjoy it, right?
No.
Like you enjoy it because it's very purposeful. It's very artistic. It's got like that's something like everyone can get behind. Uh, and I do agree with you. Like these songs feel very teenage girl. Again, that's a stereotype. Call it whatever you want, right? But like it's the world we live in. So like I agree with you. I know what you mean by that, even though like you're not trying to be toxic about it or anything, and
Yeah.
I totally believe you. Listening to this, I felt like what a delight it is to enjoy a Taylor Swift record again, from front to back. because I really like this. I didn't love it. I didn't think this was well, okay, I didn't like it more than my favorite Taylor Swift record, but having not experienced this fully front to back for the until now, you know, I have to give it a lot of credit for what this music did for the genre of pop, like what this music meant for her in her career, and definitely what it meant for the people around me that were listening to it at the time that it came out. And not to mention that there are a lot of songs here that are genuinely like just really good, that I really, really enjoyed, that I enjoyed them enough to like save them, put them on playlists, like that's like a really big litmus test for how much I enjoy a record.
You have to really enjoy it. If you're going to put it on playlists, you have to like be comfortable hearing this multiple times,
Yeah. Yeah. And I couldn't, like I said, I really, really liked it. And I'm not going to come back to like every song on here, but like there are a lot here. There's a lot of like really good music here.
Yeah.
Especially like if you don't know this side of her catalog, like I definitely recommend checking this out and checking them out as they keep coming out, like in the years to come. Like she's going to be recording like a monster for the next few years, and I really respect that.
Especially if you're a younger person who wasn't around maybe when this came out. I think it like you have a different view of Taylor than we do, and like maybe this would be interesting for you to like find out like kind of what we know.
So you mentioned like a weird feeling, and you mentioned it on your end. I had a weird feeling as well, because there are a lot of like women in my life that like really love Taylor Swift.
Yes.
And just not just women, but people in general that really, really love Taylor Swift. And I have been, obviously you and I have been quite critical of her output recently. But it was like the weird feeling comes from like, I'm listening to this for the very first time now as a 22-year-old man. Mm-hmm. But what kept popping in my head was like imagining these friends of mine as like 10-year-old girls, listening to this, like in their,
I didn't even think about it that way,
in their late 2000s themed rooms, as in like a movie. It was like a really weird feeling that I couldn't escape. And I'm just like, well, I'm here now, like listening to this for the first time as like a grown ass man, and like, it's just a weird thing. Not like a bad weird thing, just like something that I couldn't stop picturing.
Yeah. That's an interesting way of looking at it for sure. Like, yeah. And that does make it more personal. Cause I did think about my friends who liked it, but I didn't even like think to like subtract, like, what was it, 13 years from them and like see where they were when it came out. That's a very interesting perspective for sure.
And in some ways it was unavoidable because some of these lyrical themes are pretty hard to relate to, especially if you're an older man.
Yeah, there's a song called 15 that's about being a 15-year-old girl. It's like
it's a little bit hard for us to be like,
but to be like honestly, even with that, like, so I just making fun of it right now. But I thought it was a very, not only did I remember it, like it was an iconic song and like I remember it when it came out and it's like, oh yeah, I remember this.
Right.
I liked it also, just, it was like interesting and it's like, it's very honest and like very like, I definitely like, this was one of those songs I listened to like while I was walking around and it was kind of weird walking around with headphones on. It was very, everyone has anxiety. It's like, oh, is it my speakers playing? Is it my headphones playing? Especially with Bluetooth headphones.
Right.
Because I was like, I don't want people like would give me like weird looks listening to like a song called 15 about being a 15-year-old girl, but like I did like it because it was personal, it was honest, and it was like it taught me a bit about, I don't know, it's then like no new information really, but it was just like a good representation of what I knew I thought being a 15-year-old girl was kind of like. It's like
totally.
And it was just very interesting because I grew up obviously being on the 15-year-old boy side of things,
right,
and it was interesting. It talked about like senior boy, wink at me, and I forget exactly what the lyric was, but like basically Taylor's fantasy of like as a 15-year-old girl in freshman year in high school, like fantasy of like the senior guy like winking at her and saying like, I haven't seen you around here or whatever, and it was just weird because it's like, okay, that's what girls were looking for, kind of, I guess. I don't know, it was just weird to see the other side of it.
Yeah, your mileage may vary, of course, but yeah, it is an interesting way to look at it. And like I said, like some of these songs are not for everybody. That's not to say you can't relate to them, but like some of these are a little bit childish. I don't know how to like get around it. So like I have a specific example on on the best day. Some good lyrical themes here, but a few of them are kind of clunky. So she sings this really weird line like, "I have an excellent father," but like she like sings it very weirdly. Like it's just weird. Like the line is just weird. Like it's not. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying that like it's clunky. Like it's not the way you would phrase that. And like we're so used to songs like telling us everything in like metaphors and similes. She's like, this is more just like, I have an excellent father and he comes to, braid my hair or whatever. Like that's not like, we're looking for metaphorical storytelling. We're not looking for straight up, like, these are just the
this
facts,
is my
right?
experiences when I was a kid, And
right.
I think it's different because we never had, because I noticed that kind of too. And I was like, all right, what's going on here? But like, it's not metaphorical at all. Obviously it's very much like her life and like her experiences. But like, I think that for a lot of people that I never had a desire for that. And I was never missing that. Right. And I think for a lot of maybe girls who had a desire for that and didn't ever get that, or maybe even did have that at certain periods of time and lost it, it was very like, I don't know. I can see it being meaning more in a different way of like, this thing that's like, we all want, I don't know. I'll say, I thought the same thing with being a little clunky and childish, even on the more iconic songs like Love Story, obviously one of the best on the album, in my opinion, like iconic song, fantastic song, very like epitome of like being young and in love. But it did feel, it's like a little bit like, it was bad and also good from the standpoint of how childish it was, I think, because it was, okay, this is so simple. It's like just, a love story. It's like happy and like, bright and like fun and poppy and all that. But also like, that's kind of like what it does feel like to be young and in love and be like I just love the hook of like, it's a love story, baby, just say yes.
What a great hook. One of the all-time greatest hooks,
amazing
honestly.
Hook, just because it's really powerful of like, you when you're in love and you're young, like it does feel like it's just like, it would be so like, she doesn't like you, but it would just be so great if she did,
Oh yeah.
So like, just say yes.
Oh, I've been
like,
there.
I know everyone. I think a lot of people have been there. Just like, especially when you're like, when I was a single man, I got this too. Of like, it is real. Like, it's like, you can't help but feel like, I know she doesn't like you and I know that's not going to change, but you can't help but feel like it would be fantastic if she did, it'd be so great. We would be so great together. Like, you have to have any sort of attraction to someone, you have to have that feeling. And it's just so like simply put there. It's really good, I think.
The irony is not lost on me that at the time that that this song was really big, although it was really big for a couple years after it too. Like a girl that I had a really big crush on was like a massive Taylor Swift fan. And I can say that because I doubt she's listening, but like, so that's like an interesting thing. And it's crazy. Like the production on this song, it feels different because even though I know it's stylistically pretty much exactly the same, but like we've all aged since we heard this song in its heyday, especially those of us that grew up with it. And like, it feels like such a complete feeling. I don't know how to describe it. Like it's got like a warmth to it, but because it's a little different from how we remembered it, like Taylor's voice is more mature, the production is fuller, it's more crisp. It feels like it's kind of aged with us almost,
like fine
but
wine.
It still holds on to that like young, youthful energy because the lyrics are the same, and the lyrics are still like very simple, very like young puppy love, you know what I mean?
It feels like a memory, like the way she recorded it. It's like it is a memory, and like you're really putting yourself back into those shoes,
Yeah, and I kind of feel that way with a lot of these songs here, especially as well. "You Belong With Me," which was another big hit off this record. Like her voice has matured a lot. She sounds a lot like she does on the album Red on that song, which is kind of an old album even now, but like she made it a lot later. Like. And the song feels a little bit faster, but that's only just based on my own memory of "You Belong With Me." But still, like, just absolute banger of a song, and there are a lot of like times on here where it feels like, I don't know, like just that the songs are so iconic, but like they feel older because she's older.
Yeah. It was, I thought that was an interesting point which you touched on with like you had a crush on a girl that had like, these songs, and I think I know I did I'm sure, a lot of girls like these songs, so a lot of boys had crushes on girls that like these songs, obviously.
Right, yeah.
I think that's super interesting because it is interesting because I remember, like, okay, she likes Taylor Swift. I'm going to listen to a little Taylor Swift. Maybe that was a little, I don't know what the...
It hurts how much I relate to what you just said. It hurts so much.
Maybe this is just me bringing up, like, weird past memories, hearing, like, the "You Belong With Me" thing, and it's like, you want to be the guy, like, you want that song to be about you. Like, for her, you want that song to be about you, but
right.
like, it's not, like, it's tough when it's not about you. And it's like, I think it's like a weird thing with all guys, and maybe this is getting into, like, a more, like, this is kind of getting personal and, like, whatever, but it's just like, it is like, it's maybe not even personal, but just about guys in general, and like, it's kind of maybe a darker theme,
right?
But it's like, it is tough, like, to like hear, like, like, all these songs, and it's like, "You Belong With Me," and like, "We Can Be a Love Story," but like, to know it's not about you, it's like, it's just tough to kind of hear that. And like, I think that us as men kind of have to accept when girls are not fantasizing about me with that song. It's really tough to hear.
I think that goes hand in hand with, like, this weird feeling I have, because for guys our age, for this album, right, like, we were 10, 9, 10, 11 years old when this came out, and like, that's the age where you start having, like, crushes on girls and whatever, and you really want to, like, start dating and, like, have a little girlfriend of your own. And like, to know that, like, you now being 22 listening to this album in its new form, knowing that this was the soundtrack to those girls back in 2009, 10, and like we were so, like, just not there and with it, right? Because we're just the dorky guys, right?
You were so anxious about, because you didn't know what to do, right? Like, you had no idea what to do, and you were so anxious about it. At least in my experience.
And again, it's a weird feeling that, like, it kind of feels like, having, like, access to, like, a secret. It feels like that. It feels like knowing something you shouldn't know. That, like, this music, these albums from these pop stars, like, this is what they were into when you were, pining after them as a schoolboy. Like, it is such a weird thing, especially if this was not music you were really into back then. Like, I liked Taylor Swift, okay. I was not like a big Taylor Swift stan at the time or anything. I didn't have, like, any artists I really liked a lot when I was that young. There was
definitely a stigma against, like, liking Taylor Swift as a guy.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And it's a BS stigma.
Yeah, it's, like, toxic masculinity, obviously,
Yeah, absolutely. But like I said, like, I think that goes hand in hand with what you're saying, that, like, it's weird. It feels like having, like, access to, like, a cheat code that, like, you should have had when you were 10 instead of 22, because now I'm like, well, you know what, like, the girls, they're listening to folklore. It's like, well, I don't really like folklore, so that's kind of like a weird thing. We'll save that for folklore Taylor's version, I guess, in 2035.
I think it's supposed to, like, it's weird though, because it is supposed to kind of teach, it's a cheat code. It's supposed to tell you, like, what you're supposed to do, like, kind of, I don't know, like, what was wanted maybe in this past scenario. She wants the idea of that. It's, like, so weird. Like, now I have a more mature, because when I was younger and I was listening to it, I was like, okay, I'm supposed to wink, and she's supposed to like that. Like, that's just what the song says, But, like, when you're mature and you're older and you're just like, okay, it's not that she likes that. It's she likes the idea of that, of, like, her perfect guy winking at her and saying, "You're new around here."
Well, that kind of feels like the whole record, honestly. The whole record kind of feels like this is what we want our lives to be like very emotional, but also very perfect and movie-like and, like, theatrical. But like, real life isn't like that. Like, you can have someone that makes you feel the way Love Story feels, but, like, your life isn't going to be like that necessarily. Yeah. Especially, like, when you're young and you listen to this kind of music, like, you can get really swept away in it, and you want life to be like that. And you often picture your little middle school romances as being like a Taylor Swift music video, and it's not like that. Although, it can feel like that. Like, it's just really interesting, especially now, to just go back to these ideas and feelings in the future as we are now, and like, trying to contextualize it, and like you said, like thinking about them today and thinking, like, oh, I wouldn't do that today, or I wouldn't wink at some girl because she's gonna think all sorts of bad things, right? I really liked these two songs, Forever and Always.
I did like that one. That one stood out to me as well.
The normal version and the piano version are really good. And these melodies that are that are kind of all over the record, but like especially in these songs, these melodies are like these are Taylor Swift. Like this is inextricably Taylor Swift. Like only Taylor Swift could have these melodies, and it's such a delight to listen to because this is like great songwriting and this is great singing, you know, that we've come to expect from a Taylor Swift record.
Forever and Always was definitely one that I didn't remember from being young. I didn't really like know that song really. Like I wasn't like an iconic one for me, but I liked it. The title track, the initial track, I wasn't super familiar with that, but I really do think that when you're listening to pop albums, I don't think you would think a lot about the title of the record too much, like because it's just kind of like, you know, culture too. It's like,
right?
What does that even mean? You know, like but with this Fearless, like it is kind of cool because it's like she's younger and like not like obviously this is a name that she came up with then. Like this is nothing to do with like the current, you know, 2021 version of Taylor, like the name she came up with then. But I still think it's like really cool. It's like this, like, it's very, I think it's kind of like what the good parts of this album are, is that Fearless, like you are like young and you're fearless and you're like, you know, kind of, I think that's like the positive, like role model of for girls, like kind of that Taylor is that she's kind of like very, you know, speaking her mind. She's very fearless. She's very like intrepid in this very like, you know, difficult world. And obviously, like, you know, back in 2008 we didn't know anything about what was coming with her, like kind of drama of her life and like the trials and tribulations that she would go through. But I think it's like interesting that like that's kind of how she like touched off her career a bit, is with this like record Fearless. And like the song I think was a really good representation of that, like you know, kind of like this uppity, like that's one song I feel like I could relate to, of like, you know, kind of fearless. Like, I don't know. It was a cool intro to it.
Let's talk about some of these bonus tracks that were from the vault, right? They have all of these parentheses and like, you know, from the vault.
I thought that was interesting, just that like she added these to like this version of the record.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because like these were songs that like we didn't know about, and like we don't know like what the finished versions of them would have been.
Yeah.
So now they kind of sound like, yeah, they're like of the Fearless era, but some of these little riffs and production things, they kind of sound a little folklory, a little
interesting,
a little Ready, maybe a little Reputation-y.
Interesting,
you know, it's very subtle, and I have a few examples of that. But like, that doesn't mean the songs are bad or anything. But like, they're kind of like that, I think.
I definitely got that from the album in general. Like, it definitely felt like I could hear Evermore, I could hear Folklore, I could hear, you know, a bit of Reputation in Red. Like, this is kind of like, you know, she's different now. And like, that's like part of it, is that she's different now, and she's more mature now. And like, you know, it makes sense that you're going to hear some of like these previous songs on it,
right?
You know, but I'm interested to hear like what your specific, like, kind of look into it for, especially from this vault.
Mr. Perfectly Fine. It's a really interesting track. Like, because I think if it had come out then, it would have been a smash. Like, it would have been, because like all of those lyrics are so like sassy, and they would have been iconic, you know, back in the day. And I think they're probably, I mean, it's kind of a hit now, you know, it's got a lot of streams. Like, I think it's going to be like a kind of a sleeper hit here, even though like the structure and the ideas are so old now, you know, they're 13 years old, but like really interesting. I think I hear I wrote my notes here. I hear bits of like Red Taylor on this one. It sounds like it could have been on Red, which I think is great. I mean that 100% in the best way. And again, great song. Don't You has these little subtle melancholy like synths going on. And it's funny because it doesn't feel like a Fearless song. You know, when you're at this point in the track listing, track number 25, this is a long record, by the way. You have a pretty good, you know, you nail down what a Fearless song sounds like, and the themes as well. And Don't You kind of feels like it should have been on 1989. It's really interesting. I think it's one of the better from the Vault tracks, and I think it's one of the better tracks on the whole track listing here. So those were...
Remind me, and remind the audience too, because I think you mentioned this in the show. 1989 was your favorite Taylor Swift album, correct?
Yeah, my favorite. That album has Shake It Off, Blank Space, Bad Blood. You know, so those are the hits.
So good.
But Don't You sounds like it could have been like a B-side from that record because of the synths, because of like the production. It's kind of ethereal at times. So like, that's really, really good.
I like that one too. I like the Mr. Perfectly Fine, I think, a lot. I definitely thought that felt like a hit for sure.
Yeah, like if it had come out then, that would have been a hit. Like you would have had, like Mr. Perfectly Fine would have been like a tag
Yeah, like
that like
almost,
us guys would have had to like weather, you know?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I genuinely think that.
Yeah.
A quick point of discussion here. So track number 24, That's When, featuring Keith Urban. That's not like a song that really stands out to me in any way, but there's something that has kind of prompted a little bit of conversation on the in the discourse,
The
so to speak.
interwebs.
Right, and I think maybe you kind of know where I'm getting at with this. Taylor Swift, when she features a woman female vocalist, they are never given like a full verse. They are often backing, or they are usually backing vocals.
Yeah.
We saw this, we talked about this with the folklore discussion where I told you like I couldn't tell where these I think it was Haim, I didn't know where they were.
I think it was Evermore, I think.
Whatever it was, they're all
whichever.
It's all just schlock to me anyway.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell where, but Bon Iver gets a full verse, you know, and the guy from the National gets a full verse. Keith Urban gets a full verse here. Maren Morris is featured on the track You All Over Me, which is track number 21, also from The Vault. Again, backing vocals only. And so the men get full verses, the women don't. And this has become a bit of a contentious thing that's happening on the internet. I see it on Reddit. I know it's happening on Twitter as well, and on TikTok. So it's a bit of a weird thing. And obviously, you and I, as two men, we're gonna dive into it real quick.
And we're gonna have very nuanced and appropriate beliefs and opinions about this. I think I wasn't really aware of the controversy. I'm not like I just wasn't as aware of it. But I think I might say that this might be like kind of like a a recontextualization of like maybe just something that is a musical thing, like kind of giving, because I think that like the narrative must be like, oh, like Taylor kind of doesn't want the competition, like Taylor doesn't want to support other women, maybe. I don't know if exactly that's where the conversation, but I can assume that. But I kind of wanting to give Taylor a bit of the benefit of the doubt, I feel like it's kind of maybe a more of a musical choice that just like musically it works really well to have a male voice and a female voice, because she's got a very like not like run of the mill, she's a very, very iconic voice, like very good voice, but she's got a very like feminine, like typical feminine quality of her voice, right? Yeah. And I think that maybe it especially mentioning the guy from the National, Keith Urban, they have very like deep masculine voices that maybe she just Bon Iver, another great example of deep masculine voices that kind of just like play off her voice a bit. And I think I really want to give her the benefit of the doubt on this, just because I do think it just maybe is a more musical choice, like that she just wants giving them a full verse from the standpoint of like, not like, oh, I'm scared they're going to overshadow me, or like I'm competitive, or like I don't want other women to succeed. I think it is just a musical choice of like, it makes sense for a duet.
There's an artistic element to that, and that tended to be my like reaction in my head about people discussing this. Obviously, like I don't know what it's like to be a woman listening to her favorite artist and not seeing other prominent female vocalists given full entire verses on these tracks, right? So I don't know how that feels. I don't want to like step on that perfectly valid feeling, I think, right?
Yeah.
But I do agree that like Taylor Swift, more than any other singer-songwriter I know, is the person with the fullest control over her artistic vision. To me, maybe aside from her first few albums or songs from many, many years ago, her to me like seems like the person with the most like, she doesn't do anything that she doesn't want to do. Okay? And God, do we suffer for it sometimes, because some of the albums have not been great.
I suppose it's interesting, like, if I like her last two projects were produced by the National guy, right? But if looking, it was interesting to hear this version, this like Taylor, these songs from like 13 years ago, because like we were talking about like juxtaposition of voices, and if I was to like pick a voice that was the exact opposite of Taylor Swift in 2008 it would be the National now, because
Right.
it's just so like deep, like somber, like manly, but like ensures it's like young and like very feminine, very
Right.
bright, like bright eyed, voice. I just
Yeah, let's get Bon Iver on there, to really contrast the deep, I think the equivalent, the pop equivalent might be like maybe Khalid. That would have been a good, a good juxtaposition there.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, like it's a funny thing, because you were mentioning like who are the prominent men that she has featured, and I forgot that, like, who we can count among those ranks? Future has been on a Taylor Swift record too,
and Kendrick Lamar.
You're right. It's like, but like not a single, at least as far as I know, not like a single prominent woman female vocalist has been given like a full complete verse here, and that's like a weird thing that, like, I wonder if she'll ever have like an answer to that, because that is like a genuine question. Again, I don't want her to second guess her art or her artistic decisions, because like I said, like her more than anybody, she clearly has that control over it. But it will be interesting to hear her side of it.